All right, on the genetic foundations of development, I am not going to go super in-depth into this area, so if you're interested in this type of stuff, feel free to read the book in depth if you're super interested in this type of stuff. So genetic influences on behavior evolved over time. We have a long evolutionary history that is retained in our DNA. So each of us carries a human genetic code that we inherited from our parents and them before. Here's an image. So we have the cell, and inside the nucleus we have the chromosomes. They're in the nucleus of the human cell. They are thread-like structures that are made up of, here's the chromosomes, they are made up of DNA. DNA is a complex molecule. It has the double helix shape and contains our genetic information, contains the genes. And genes are the units of hereditary information. They're the short segments of the DNA, so they're found in there. Each gene has its own location on a particular chromosome. There are currently several different approaches to gene identification and discovery that are in use today. The one that I find most interesting for me is the completion of the Human Genome Project. It has led to the use of Genome-Wide association method to try to identify different genetic variations linked to a particular disorder. To make that a little bit more easily digestible, basically what they do is they will take people that have a certain disorder and people that do not have a disorder, and they'll look at their genes and they'll find the commonalities in the genes for the people that have disorders. So like a disorder like autism, you can find some genes that maybe are linked to autism by going through this process. Current estimates are that humans have over 43,000 genes, so there's a lot of things going on there. And the genetic expression is going to be affected by the gene's environment, where you're at, what you're exposed to. There is going to be collaboration among the genes. So you've got these 43,000 genes that are all working together, and then they're also working with the environment. So there's going to be collaboration between those genes on what is going to be turned on, what's going to be turned off, what's going to be turned up, what's going to be turned down. And that's going to be with the collaboration of all those genes and with your environment. Among the influences on that is going to be the hormones that are circulating in your blood. The flow of hormones can be affected by all kinds of things, the light, the day length, your nutrition, your behaviors, all factors such as stress, radiation, temperatures, those can all influence gene expression. So you have your genes and the environment, and basically they can turn things up, turn things down, turn them on, turn them off. Related to this idea, so the book talks a little bit about chromosomal and gene-linked abnormalities. In figure 5 and 6, they talk about the chromosomal ones, and 6 is some sex-linked abnormalities. And if you would like to look through those, you can, like Down syndrome is going to be a chromosomal abnormality. Diabetes is going to be a sex-linked abnormality. Sickle cell anemia, spina bifida. There are treatments for a lot of these abnormalities, but they are not going to erase the problem, but they may be able to improve the individual's adaptive behaviors and their quality of life. We have more treatments for all these things than we did, 50, 100 years ago. On dealing with these genetic abnormalities, not all individuals who carry a genetic disorder develop this disorder. So there's some people that may be just carriers for the disorder and they will never develop it, but they may give those disorders to their children. And so what the book goes into next is the idea of reproductive challenges and choices. So if you get pregnant, there's all kinds of tests that you can run to see what the condition of the fetus is. And since we now have all these knowledge of genes and genetic abnormalities, it opens up, this is the way the text words this, opens up new choices for the parents, but it also raises ethical questions. And I'm sure you're probably beginning to deduce what I'm talking about here. On these diagnostic tests, so you have things like ultrasounds. So this is direct sound waves at the fetus, and you're able to get an image. You've probably seen one of those. There is and that can detect like structural abnormalities. Can determine the sex of the fetus as well. A fetal MRI, so it's a little bit more detailed. You can see the organs, the structures, maybe diagnose fetal malformations here. And it's able to, the fetal MRI is able to better detect certain abnormalities compared to the ultrasound. There are other tests that you could do, like an amniocentesis, where you take some of the amniotic fluid and you can test it for chromosomal or metabolic disorders. But in doing this, it does kind of raise the difficult question of what you are going to do about if you do have some type of genetic abnormality, some type of malformation. And so it's going to be a difficult choice there. In some cases, some of these things, like obviously there's some of those that we looked at before, like diabetes, that's definitely something a person can live with for their entire lives. There are some abnormalities, though, where once the baby is born, they're only going to live for a few days, maybe a couple weeks. And so that's going to be a really hard decision for the parent. The idea that you will carry the baby for 9 months and it's only going to be alive for a couple of days. I'm sure that is extremely, profoundly a difficult decision. And so all of these advances we've made, really brings up a lot of ethical concerns on what you want to look at. Even one of the things the book talks about is even determining the sex of the fetus. In some cultures, that can create an ethical concern because in some cultures, it's more they are more likely to keep a male child than a female child. And that's obviously very sad. But there are also some reasons to do some of these tests because you'll see things that you'll know, okay, I need to prepare for this. For example, I think it was 2 of my nephews they were going to be born breech. And so basically what that means is they are turned around and they would be coming out buttocks first is the way they word that. And that is going to be problematic because they could get the umbilical cord wrapped around their neck. And so if you're going to have a baby that's potentially going to be born breech and you can't get it to turn around, go out head first, you might have to have a C-section on the baby. And so that's definitely something you want to know. And that's one of the reasons why these medical advances are great, because it's like there's a lot of babies that are going to be born now because we know that wouldn't have survived the birth process. At this point, the book talks a little bit about infertility and reproduction as well. So about 10 to 15% of U.S. couples experience infertility. So it's a pretty large number. What they consider that to be is the inability to conceive after 12 months of regular intercourse. The cause can be with the man or with the woman. And there's about 40,000 couples in the U.S. that try this high-tech assisted reproduction like IVF, in vitro fertilization. The eggs and the sperm are combined in the laboratory, and then one of the eggs is transferred back to the woman's uterus. One of the results of doing this can be an increase in multiple births. So if you see a woman that had 10 kids, you may have seen TV shows like this. If you have a woman that has 10 kids, chances are that is not going to be a natural birth, and that was somehow influenced by some of this high-tech assisted reproduction that we have now. And the book also talks about adoption here. And one of the reasons they're talking about this is like, how do people that are adopted, how they turn out? Kind of going back to the beginning of the chapter with the story of the 3 identical strangers. Adoption, it's a social, legal process where the parent and child, the relationship is established between people that were not related at birth. And how do adopted children fare? Those adopted very early are more likely to have positive outcomes compared to those that are adopted later in life. And this makes sense. So if you have a baby that's adopted the day that they're born, chances are they're going to turn out just fine. If you are like 8 years old or 10 years old, the chances that you're going to have some negative outcomes becomes larger compared to a child that's adopted the same day they're born. Despite that, risk associated with early deprivation, the majority of kids turn out just fine. All right, on the next slides, we'll talk a little bit more about nature and nurture.